I used to believe there were lines in a marriage you simply didn't cross line side. Never even be tempted by "I was wrong." This is my confession. I'm Felicia, 52 years old, and you've been married too. Peter, for nearly 3 decades, we met when I was in college. And he was already establishing a career in accounting. We fell in love with the easy confidence of youth, got married, bought a comfortable house on Acqueep Street, and settled into a life that everyone around us called stable, even enviable. We never had. Children theming was never right, and eventually we just made peace with the idea of a small household. Over the years, we slipped into patterns so familiar that I could predict Peter's every move. Our life wasn't unhappy, no. Dramatic arguments, no harsh. Words, just a steady routine that turned the days into a mellow blur as we approached our 30th anniversary. I started feeling a nagging sense of time slipping away. Peter, meanwhile, focused on his upcoming retirement plans, chattering out financial safety. Nets, maybe a winter home in a warmer climate. I treated sharing with him, the restless nestling in me how. I worried we were getting old in spirit, not just in years, but he just nods sympathetically and remind me that soon we'd have all that time in the world for hobbies or trips somehow that soon never felt close now, and the hush in our home seemed taut again. That's when I volunteered to help with a local adult education program. At the community center, partly to distract myself, partly to feel useful again. It was an evening workshop series that offered short courses on everything from baking to creative writing. I assisted in a crafts class, something small. I thought wouldn't demand much when the center's coordinator asked if I could help in a new class. About interiorizing basics, it sounded funny. I'd always liked decorating my house or ironing furniture, or choosing paint colors on the first evening. I arrived to find only a handful of participants. The instructor was Joseph, around 38, if I had to guess. Newly moved to town, he introduced himself with a gentle smile explaining that he'd spent years working as a freelance designer, but recently decided to share his experience through tiaking. I noticed how earnestly he spoke to each attendee, making sure they felt comfort. When he approached me, he asked if I was interested in design or just volunteering. I admitted I was mostly volunteering, but found the topics intriguing. He lit up and said he was grateful for any extra set of hands in that first session. We barely spoke beyond class logistics, handing out pens, gathering feedback forms, but I was struck by how enthusiastic he was. He had a warmth and enthusiasm for color palettes and layout ideas that turned a mundanese of subject into something alive. It reminded me of the passion I used to have in my own life, decades back before outings took over as weeks passed. I found myself lingering after each class to chat with Joseph about design tips or out of stage. A living space. Sometimes we'd walk out together too. The parking lot discussing random subjects, old movies, a new cafe, and town music. He liked our conversations, left me energized a feeling I hadn't associated with a everyday life in a long time. I told myself it was harmless, that I was simply enjoying good conversation, but a small voice inside hinted at something more, a subtle spark. I couldn't quite interrupt her in the meantime. Noticed I came home a bit later on class nights, but never. Proud, he assumed I was dedicated my volunteer role and asked if I found it interesting. I gave him vague answers. Oh, it's a nice group where the instructor is quite knowledgeable. I never named Joseph or mentioned how. I sometimes stayed behind to talk design theories or personal anecdotes. The hush in our marriage deepened. We didn't have fights, but we also didn't share the deeper parts of our day eventually. Joseph invited me to see a small renovation project he was doing at another volunteer's home, suggesting I might enjoy witnessing a real-life example of interior design in action. I hesitated, scanning for a valid excuse not to go, but the truth was I felt a stirring of excitement at the idea. I accepted. When I arrived at that house, I saw him rearranging furniture and picking color swatches with a level of detail that was oddly captivating. He explained each choice, occasionally asking for my input. I wasn't an expert, yet he valued my opinions with a sincerity that made me feel seen. After finishing, we ended up grabbing a quick sandwich at a nearby deli. I learned more about his background. He traveled widely, picking up designated inspiration from different cultures. He asked about my life, my marriage, whether he had kids or future plans. I answered, cautiously aware that discussing my deep restlessness might reveal too much still. The openness in his eyes encouraged me. I let slip that I sometimes felt stuck, that Peter and I have grown too comfortable. Joseph nodded sympathetically, offering a gentle remark about how it's never too late to chase fresh experience. I felt my cheeks warm. Thawi tried to brush it off as nothing serious. From there, the dynamic between us shifted. We started texting outside off class, random messages about interior design ideas, a music playlist he recommended, a photo of a quirky thrift store lamp. I passed by each exchange, parked, a little thrill, even though we mostly kept it friendly. I found myself smelling at my phone, a gesture I hadn't done in years. It seemed I felt younger, more engaged than. I'd look at Peter absent-mindedly flipping TV channels, nth living room, and guilt would twist in me gut. I pushed that feeling aside, telling myself it wasn't an affair, just a connection with someone who shared my renewed sense of curiosity. One night, I ended up staying late at the community center because Joseph wanted to finalize plans for a special workshop finale. We sifted through supply lists, rearranged seats, and empty hall, and eventually ended up side by side on the floor drawing mock-up sketches of the setup. We laughed. Though it felt like a school project. The conversation turned personal. He asked more directly about me, my hopes, regrets, what I wanted next in life. A lump rose in my throat. I knew that turning 60 soon felt like an unstoppable train. That he worried I'd slip through my final decades without truly feeling a live again. Before I realized it, tears welled up. He gently placed a hand on my shoulder, asking if I was okay. My heart pounded. Nobody had asked me that with such genuine concern in so long. I fought the urge to lean into him to find solace in that brief contact. Sensing the immense intensity, I broke away, pretending I had to lock up the main door. But the next day he texted me saying he hoped I felt better, that it meant something to him that I'd shared a piece of my vulnerability. My pulse raced as I typed a reply, a wave of gratitude and a flicker of something more. Over the next days, we found ourselves in more quiet corners at the end of a workshop or in a side room of the community center, continuing the conversation that veered from design into personal reflections. Each chat of back layers of me guarded self, revealing a yearning I never admitted openly. Eventually, that desire manifested in a moment that changed everything. After a big workshop 6, Joseph suggested we celebrate with a coffee. We ended up at a small, softly lit cafe near the river. Long after it had emptied off customers, the barista was tidying up tables. So we weren't exactly alone, but it felt privatino as we reminisced about how we'd pulled off the workshop. The talk drifted dagging to our personal lives, to whether we believed in reinvention at our age, and made a light-hearted comment that maybe I was too old to dream of big changes. Hal looked at me with an earnest intensity. I don't think it's ever too late, he said quietly. In that hush, we both recognized electricity between the use. My face flushed, half in fear, half in undeniable excitement. He reached for my hand across tably. Should have pulled back, reminded him and myself that I was married, that this was a boundary we couldn't cross. And steady, let him hold it, my breath catching Athao. Right, it felt in that instant. I confessed how lonely I'd been, how I'd spent months, maybe years, running on autopilot. Tears pricked my eyes. He moved around the table, gently wiping a tear from my cheek. The cafe's overhead lights flowed softly, and with each second we crossed lines of propriety. We shared our first kiss, tentative, bittersweet, knowing it was something we shouldn't want, but no longer able. Taught me. I left that cafe in turmoil, half elated, half in anguish over betraying Peter and the life we built. For a week, I avoided Joseph the first, with excuses about being busy, cutting our conversation short, but that only made the longing more acute. Late one night, I sat on the couch with Peter, flipping channels as usual, and felt tears rising. I opted for real conversation, but words never came out. The next morning, I texted Joseph, I can't go on like this. We need to talk. We met in a secluded park area somewhere neither office frequented, hoping not to bump into neighbors. I arrived first, heart pounding when he showed up, eyes full of concern. And I nearly broke down. I explained that I loved Peter in a familiar, decades-old way, but something in me was starving for the closeness and excitement. Joseph proved it. We both admitted we didn't want to hurt anyone, yet we'd already crossed that threshold. Eventually, we found ourselves clinging to each other, confessions of longing tumbling out that day, sealed our unspoken pact that we would continue in secrecy, at least until I decided what to do about my marriage. The following weeks were a reckless juggle of lies and stolen mints. I told Peter I had extra duties at the center while Joseph and I met nude off the way spots or huddled in Hisker, talking quietly, kissing with a fervor that both thrilled. And terrifying each time guilt gnawed at my conscience, I'd look at Peter, see how he assumed everything was normal and feel tears building behind my eyes. Yet with Joseph I rediscovered a spark I thought he'd lost forever, a sense that life could still be vibrant. I must have grown careless, or maybe Peter grew suspicious. On his own one Sunday morning, he confronted me asking why I was always busy, why my phone buzzed at odd hours, my face went pale. I tried to concoct a believable lie, but I stumbled over details. He pressed me, dread filling his voice. Is there someone else? I crumpled, tears flowing as I admitted there was. I didn't mention the name or the depth of our intimacy, just that I'd grown close to a man. I volunteered with Peter, stared at me in betrayal and heartbreak, then stormed out saying I needed time to think. In the days after we spoke, only in short bursts, mostly about finances or logistics, the talk off the marriage we once had felt too raw. Joseph tried to be supportive, telling me he'd step away if it would help me salvage my marriage, but I couldn't tear myself from him so abruptly. The reality was that I needed to see if the bond we shared could be something real by empathy. Yet, I also felt the weight of 30 years with Peter, a history that once meant everything to me, was excruciating as of now I'm caught between heartbreak and possibility. Peter hasn't definitively ended things, but he stays elsewhere most nights. Joseph lingers on the fringes of my life, offering solace, uncertain if I can truly be with him or if I'll try to mend things. With my husband, I wonder daily if I should have forced a conversation with Peter years ago, before the hush grew so large that a single spark from someone else could burn my marriage to the ground. I wish I could report a neat resolution. Instead, I fin myself. In the aftermath of my choice, faced with the fragile truth that immuring emotional emptiness can push you into betraying the life you thought was stable. My name is Felicia, and at 52, I risked everything I built with Peter for a connection with Joseph, a man 15 years younger who reminded me that even a settled life can hide restless desires. Whether it was worth the wreck remains in sleep. Perhaps time will reveal whether we can rebuild a new path alone or with own of them, or if the damage is too profound. Tofix, for now, I stand in the ruins of what was forging forward with a trembling hope that honesty might finally set me free.